It was 8:27 a.m. when I realized I wasn't on the agenda. I had refreshed my inbox 3 times that morning, waiting for the calendar. Invite, the final strategy presentation to Brightleaf. The biggest pitch of our fiscal year. A project I had lived and breathed for the last 3 months. Every slide, every insight, every inch of that deck had my fingerprints on it, and yet, nothing. No invite, no slot, no mention. I blinked at my screen, then double-checked the internal calendar. There it was, Brightleaf Strategy Final. Executive Team Review, 9:00 a.m. Boardroom. A listed attendees, Derek Vaughan, CEO, Martin Trent, Chief Strategy Officer, Leah from Creative, and a fourth seat listed simply as TBD. My name wasn't TBD. It never had been. I stood up slowly, made my way to Claire's desk. She was the only person who ever gave it to me straight. "They're going in without me?" I asked, voice low. Claire looked up, guilt flickering in her eyes. She hesitated, then said, "They had a messaging concern. Derek thought it might confuse the client if too many people were involved." "Confuse them?" I laughed quietly. "I'm the one who wrote the messaging." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I turned and walked back to my desk. My feet felt heavier than they should. Maybe it was the boots. Maybe it was something else. This wasn't the first time I'd been cut out of my own work, but it was the first time it hurt this much. Because Brightleaf wasn't just another client. They were different. Their VP of Partnerships, Daniel Cross, actually listened. He'd asked tough questions in discovery. He'd challenged assumptions. And each time I had responded, not with fluff, but with data logic and care. We had built something real. And now my work was being delivered by someone who saw it as just another line item. At 9:04, I watched through the frosted glass as Derek walked into the boardroom. Crisp navy suit iPad in hand, smile like he had something clever in his pocket. Leah followed. Then Martin. They looked polished, prepared, and utterly detached from the actual content. I stayed at my desk, staring at the spot on my screen where the invite should have been. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, not typing, just lingering, stuck between anger and resignation. By 10:01, the meeting ended. The door opened. I heard laughter, saw coffee cups. Martin high-fived someone. Derek passed by my desk without a glance. That should have been it. Another quiet erasure. But at 10:23, something happened. My inbox pinged. Subject segmentation model. Clarification from Daniel Cross at BrightleafTech.com to Julia Tran at Cinevision.com. "Hi, Julia. I'm reaching out because something in this morning's presentation didn't quite track. The segmentation logic. Slide 12 seemed different from what we previously discussed. The nuances were lost. You were the lead on that section, correct? I'd appreciate the chance to hear your version again directly. Just you and me. Are you available this week, Daniel?" I read the message 3 times, then once more, just to be sure I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Claire appeared beside me, reading over my shoulder. "Oh my God," she whispered. He noticed I nodded. He remembered. That night I stayed in the office late, not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed to remember who I was. I opened the original deck I'd built. Then the version Derek had presented. He had changed everything, simplified the logic, removed key data points, added buzzwords that sounded nice but meant nothing. The segmentation framework I had spent 21 days refining had been reduced to a bullet point. Targeting based on values, not just demographics. What did that even mean? I closed my laptop and sat still, the city lights blinking faintly through the office windows. The next morning, I logged into Zoom 5 minutes early. I wore the same blazer I'd worn during our first call months ago. Daniel joined right on time. "Hi, Julia," he said warmly. "Thanks for making the time." Of course, he didn't waste any. I'll be honest. Yesterday's deck felt watered down. It didn't reflect the depth we expected, and it didn't sound like you. I stayed quiet, then said, "That's because it wasn't me." He nodded. "That's what I thought." We walked through the segmentation model. Again, this time, my version, the clusters, the emotional drivers, the market shifts. I could see his expression change as I explained the logic behind each quadrant. By the end, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed thoughtfully. That's the version I want our board to hear. I blinked. Your board, yes, we're reviewing strategy next Tuesday, and I want you to lead that section. Not Cinevision, not Derek Yu. He paused, then added, the person who actually did the work should be the one to explain it. I almost didn't know what to say. I'm in, I said softly. And just like that, everything shifted. For the first time in my career, I wasn't being brought in to support the room. I was the room. By Monday morning, word had already spread. I could feel it the moment I stepped into the office, just subtle enough to deny, just loud enough to notice. The way conversations paused as I passed, the glances that lasted a beat too long, the interns pretending to focus on spreadsheets, but clearly eavesdropping. I wasn't on the gossip thread, but I didn't need to be. Someone had leaked the news. Brightleaf wanted me to present directly to their board. Not Derek, not the senior team, just me. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't scheme. I didn't demand credit. I just didn't disappear. And now people didn't quite know what to do with that, Claire. Of course was thrilled. She dropped a croissant on my desk, grinning. You've officially rattled the hierarchy, she said. Derek had a closed-door call with Martin this morning. It lasted 13 minutes and ended with someone slamming a pen. Should I be worried? I asked, unwrapping the pastry. She tilted her head. Maybe, but more likely, they're just scrambling to look like they planned this. That afternoon, I received a formal invite from Brightleaf's board liaison. Subject strategic presentation, Brightleaf board strategy session. Attendees, Daniel Cross, Brightleaf board of directors, Julia Tran, location, Brightleaf, HQ, Redwood Room, 18th floor. No one else from Cinevision was listed. Not Derek, not Martin, not Leah. Just me. The reality hit me somewhere between relief and panic. I'd always wanted recognition, but I never imagined it would come like this on a stage, this big, this fast, and this solo. By Wednesday, Claire and I had booked flights, prepped documents, and dry ran the entire presentation twice. She wasn't allowed in the meeting, but she insisted on flying out with me anyway. You don't need backup slides, she said. You need backup energy. I didn't argue. Thursday morning, I stood in the lobby of Brightleaf's headquarters in San Francisco, watching the elevators rise and fall behind a wall of green moss and polished stone. My hands were steady. My breath was even. The receptionist handed me a visitor badge. They've been expecting you. Daniel met me in the hallway with a quiet smile. Julia, he said, shaking my hand. Welcome you ready, as I'll ever be. He gestured down the hall. Just remember, they don't care about polish. They care about truth. Inside the Redwood Room, 10 board members sat around a wide oak table. The air smelled like cedar and espresso. No one stood, no one smiled, but when I introduced myself, something shifted. They leaned in. I walked them through the segmentation framework, the real one. I showed how different customer clusters interacted with the brand based on values, not just demographics. I explained how Oris had misread an entire tier of buyers by leaning too hard on market trends and not enough on emotional trust. Slide after slide, I told the truth, not the agency version, not the watered-down pitch, but the truth we'd uncovered together. By the time I reached the final recommendation, the room was silent. I clicked to the last slide. No flashy title, just one line. If you want loyalty, speak the language of belief, not features. There was a pause. Then one board member leaned forward. Why wasn't this what we heard last week? Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at me. I smiled gently. Because sometimes the person doing the work isn't the one allowed in the room. Another board member nodded slowly. Well, she is now. After the session. Daniel pulled me aside. They're all in. The plan is approved and they want you to stay on as the strategic lead. I blinked. Not just for this phase, no, he said. They want to retain you, not cinevision you. I swallowed hard. That's not even something I considered. Well, he said, maybe it's time you did. That night in my hotel room, I sat at the edge of the bed staring at the skyline outside. Somewhere in that blur of glass and lights, my career had just split into two timelines, the one I'd been building quietly for years, and the one I'd just stepped into. The next morning Derek called. I let it ring twice before answering. Julia, he said, his voice tight. Professional rehearsed. Congratulations. I heard the meeting went... Well, it did. I think it's important we regroup, he continued. Maybe debrief. Get ahead of client expectations. Align on messaging. Happy to do that, I replied. But you should know they've asked to work directly with me. Moving forward, I'm considering it. There was a long pause. I see, he said. Another pause. Well, we'll be in touch. He hung up. I set the phone down and looked out at the city again. Claire texted. So, how'd it feel? I typed back one sentence, like I finally walked into the room I spent 10 years building, and this time I didn't need anyone's permission to stay. The Monday after my presentation at Brightleaf started the same as most. Mondays, coffee in hand. Elevator, humming a quiet office, still shaking off the weekend haze. But this time something was different. I didn't notice it at first. It was in the subtleties, the way people greeted me, the way they paused mid-conversation when I entered a room. The way no one dared ask about the meeting, but everyone clearly knew how it went. Power. I've learnt doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks through the door in a blazer no one noticed before. At 9:13 a.m., my inbox pinged with a message from HR. Subject: internal role adjustment discussion. Hi, Julia. We'd like to schedule a conversation this week about your current scope of work and evolving responsibilities, especially in light of your direct engagement with Brightleaf. Let us know your availability. Natalie, HRBP. I read it twice. No title offered, no promises made. Just that vague corporate phrasing that meant, you've made waves and now we're trying to stay afloat. Before I could reply, I heard Derek's voice behind me. Morning, Julia, he said casual, like we hadn't just switched roles in the eyes of a billion-dollar client. I turned in my chair. Good morning. He lingered. Quick word in my office. I followed him down the hall, resisting every urge to overthink. His office was still corner-facing, still adorned with sleek modern art and untouched leadership books, stacked too perfectly on the shelf. He sat behind his desk, folded his hands. I wanted to talk to you about Brightleaf, he said. And... Perception, I asked. Yes, he smiled, practiced. There's a sense right now that things are shifting quickly, that there's some ambiguity around roles. He meant his role, and mine, I nodded. The client asked to work directly with me. That wasn't my decision. I know he said a bit too quickly, and I respect that, but we need to be careful about how this reflects internally. We're a team. Julia, not a star system. There it was. The warning under the compliment. I've never positioned myself as a star, I said evenly. I just showed up and told the truth. He paused, adjusting his posture. You've done great work, he said, truly. And I think there's a place for that kind of independent leadership in the organization. We just need to align on how that evolves. I smiled. Happy to align as long as that alignment includes credit. His eyes flickered. Just for a second I stood. Thanks for the chat. Back at my desk, Claire was waiting with that look she always got when she knew I'd been cornered. He tried to pull the "we're all one team" speech, she guessed, right after the "don't outshine the system" monologue. She rolled her eyes. Classic. They want you to be brilliant, just not so brilliant that people notice. I opened the calendar and scheduled the HR meeting for Wednesday morning. Then I returned to the Brightleaf account. We were now in the strategy rollout phase, messaging frameworks, audience-specific adaptations, internal adoption maps. All of it fell to me. And while the agency still held the contract, Daniel made it clear my name was now attached to the vision, every deck, every touch point, every decision. On Tuesday, Leah from Creative stopped by. I just wanted to say, she began, eyes a little hesitant, your framework. It made our job easier, like, way easier. We've been building brand guidelines for years, but this was the first time the why came before the what. So thank you. It took me a second to respond, because in 5 years of working together, it was the first time anyone from Creative thanked me. That night I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to get ahead. I turned off the lights in my pod, plugged in my headphones, and refined the Brightleaf messaging structure, until it didn't just sound smart, it felt right. At 8:44 p.m., a Slack message popped up from Daniel Cross. Just read the revised draft. This is exactly what we needed. The board's already referring to it as Julia's language matrix. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen, then took a screenshot. No one ever built a slide for me with my name on it. But now a boardroom had casually coined something with my name in the title, and I didn't even ask. The next morning, the HR meeting was short. Natalie, the HR partner, smiled gently. We're proposing a transition to Director of Strategic Solutions. It formalizes your client-facing role and reflects your growing autonomy. I nodded slowly, and she added, we'd like to attach a retention bonus to this level, just to make sure you're supported as your visibility grows. It wasn't an apology for the years I was ignored, but it was an acknowledgement, and sometimes that's more powerful than money. When I returned to my desk, Claire had left a sticky note on my keyboard. They're finally giving you the role, but you already earned the authority. I smiled, and for the first time truly believed it. Thursday morning quarterly strategy. Alignment. It used to be Derek's favorite performance, the kind of high-level meeting where he could say words like synergy and pipeline, optimization without needing to explain a single slide. The board would nod. The VPs would applaud, and we'd all leave wondering what exactly we'd just committed to. But this time was different. This time, the Brightleaf account sat squarely at the top of the agenda, and our newly minted Director of Strategic Solutions was listed as co-presenter. I arrived 5 minutes early. Derek was already there, standing at the head of the table, flipping through printouts, like a man trying to memorize a script he didn't write. His smile when he saw me was thin, professional, and coated in subtle tension. Morning, he said. I nodded. Morning. The room filled quickly. Martin from Finance, Leah from Creative Dev, from Digital Ops, and a few others I didn't usually see unless something big was brewing. They nodded at me with a strange new mixture of familiarity and respect, like they had finally been given permission to see me. Claire slid into the seat next to mine. Your name's on the placard, she whispered. That's when you know they can't pretend anymore. Derek cleared his throat and opened the meeting. Thanks everyone for making the time. He began doing his usual circuit of eye contact. We've had an eventful few weeks, and I want to align on a few key initiatives, especially around Brightleaf. As many of you know, Julia has taken point on that relationship. Taken point. As if I had volunteered to do something he didn't want, I stayed quiet. He clicked to the first slide, a high-level timeline. The rollout is moving, and we're seeing positive signs, Julia. Maybe you can walk us through the messaging framework you've been using. The tone was neutral, but I could feel it. The quiet concession. I walked to the front of the room and clicked to my own deck. This isn't just messaging, I began. This is architecture. I walked them through the segmentation logic, the values matrix, the messaging, shifts by generation. Every piece of it was rooted in data and intuition, years of observing not just markets but people. Their trust, their attention spans, their hopes. The room was silent as I spoke, and for the first time, no one was checking their phones. Dev leaned forward. So, you're saying the language we've been using is actively turning away a third of the buyer base? I nodded, not intentionally, but yes, it's coded for control, not collaboration. Brightleaf customers want inclusion, not instruction, Leah added. This is what we've been missing. Creative's been pushing for tone shifts, but we didn't have the structure to back it. I looked at her. Now you do. Martin tapped his pen thoughtfully. Derek, are we planning to apply this model to other enterprise accounts? Derek hesitated. Well, that's a discussion for later. We've already started adapting it. Claire interrupted, voice calm but clear. We're testing Julia's framework on 2 other B2B accounts. Early results are promising. He blinked. I wasn't aware of that. Brightleaf was aware, she said matter of fact. They encouraged its silence, that kind of silence that feels like a pin dropped and everyone heard it. I clicked to the final slide. This isn't about me. It's about building messaging that actually earns attention. Brightleaf is just the first client to demand it out loud. I stepped back from the screen, and for the first time in my career, the entire room turned not to the CEO, but to me for what came next. Derek sat stiffly. He adjusted his collar, then smiled as if none of it mattered. Well, I think that was informative, he said. Great to see alignment. But no one echoed him, because they weren't aligned to him anymore. After the meeting, people stopped by my desk, quietly, one by one. Leah left a note. Let's build this into our full creative brief system. You're on to something, Martin sent a Slack. Would love to explore this framework across product tiers. This could be game-changing. Dev popped his head around the corner. You made that meeting worth going to, just saying. And then there was Derek. He walked by, didn't stop, didn't smile, just muttered, Nice job today. No eye contact, no handshake. But that was okay, because I wasn't there for him anymore. That night, Claire and I stayed late polishing the next stage of the Brightleaf rollout. She pulled up 2 chairs to the window overlooking the city. You feel it right, she asked. The shift, I nodded slowly. For years, I said, I thought I was lucky to be in the room. She raised her eyebrows, and now I smiled. Now I know I belong there. 1 week after the quarterly strategy meeting, my calendar exploded. Every department suddenly wanted my insight. My inbox overflowed with invites. Can you speak to our teams off-site? We'd love for you to review our Q2 pitch deck. Mind hopping on a quick call with our new product lead. Just a month ago, I had to fight to get into meetings. Now I had to fight to find time to breathe. But I didn't complain because for once, the spotlight wasn't blinding. It was illuminating, not ego-driven, just overdue. Still part of me stayed cautious. Power in a corporate setting is a tricky currency. One moment, they call you indispensable. The next, they restructure your role into silence. So when I saw a 10 a.m. invite from Brightleaf's Daniel Cross with the subject line, Private Check-in, Julia only. I braced for anything. The call began as usual, cordial-focused. Daniel asked for updates on rollout metrics, stakeholder response, brand sentiment. Then near the end, his tone shifted. There's something I'd like to ask, he said. And you don't have to answer right away. I paused. Okay. We've been reviewing your work across not just Brightleaf, but other verticals you've touched through Cinevision, your clarity, your intuition, the way you map market psychology. It's rare. I blinked, unsure where this was going. He continued. We've been asking ourselves a hard question, not whether Cinevision can deliver, but whether you could deliver more. If you weren't tethered to them. The air went still. He went on. We're exploring a new advisory model. Small, nimble, high trust. We'd want you to lead it independently. You'd set the tone, the framework. Full strategic license. I couldn't speak for a moment. We wouldn't just be a client, he added. We'd be a partner. I let the words settle, like a slow ripple across a very still pond. I'd spent 10 years trying to be seen. And now someone was asking me if I was ready to be followed. I'm honored, I said honestly. But I'm still under contract with Cinevision. Daniel nodded. I'm not asking you to leap today, but I want you to know when you're ready to build. We're ready to support you. That night, I stayed at the office long after everyone else left. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check my phone. I just sat at the long wooden table in the communal space and let it all wash over me. There was a time I would have run straight to Derek, asked for permission, asked what he thought, but not anymore, asked. Because now I understood something no one teaches you in business school. Sometimes growth doesn't come from promotion, it comes from separation. The next morning, I walked into Derek's office unannounced. He looked up surprised. "Julia, what's up?" "I want to talk about the future," I said. "Of course," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Let's talk growth path, maybe chief strategy officer down the line. You've definitely proven your—" "I'm not talking about title growth," I interrupted. "I'm talking about building something separate." He blinked. "I don't follow." "I've been offered a chance to create something independent. A client-first consultancy, small, agile, and honest." Silence. Then he asked. "Who?" "I can't say yet," I replied. "But it's real." Derek leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "You're saying you'd leave. After everything we've invested," I met his gaze. "You didn't invest in me, you tolerated me. Until the client refused to." His jaw clenched. "You think it'll be easier out there?" "No," I said, "but it'll be mine." He didn't respond. I stood. "I'm giving you 2 months' notice. I'll complete the Brightleaf transition, but after that, I go." I left his office without another word. 2 hours later, Claire slid into the chair beside me. "So," she whispered, "I heard." I nodded. "It's time." She didn't ask for details. She didn't ask if I was scared. She just said, "Good. I'll start drafting your logo." My last official week at Cinevision didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a quiet beginning, dressed in corporate beige. No dramatic confrontation, no impassioned speech, just a series of polite goodbyes, curious glances, and half-hearted offers of coffee that no one actually followed through on. I spent my final days wrapping up the Brightleaf transition. I documented everything. Frameworks, insights, workflows with surgical clarity. I left no gaps, no room for blame, and absolutely no excuse for anyone to say, "We didn't know what she was doing." Derek remained noticeably absent. The man who had once micromanaged decks, down to font size, now didn't so much as swing by my desk. His silence wasn't hostile, it was defensive, because deep down I think he knew he hadn't lost an employee. He'd lost the room. On my last day, I packed up my things into a single box, a few notebooks, a dying desk plant I'd kept alive out of spite, and one worn-out USB drive labeled Originals. And of course, the sticky note Claire had given me months ago, "You already earned the authority." I ran my thumb over it before tucking it into my bag. Claire walked me out. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. At the elevator, she turned to me and said, "The building's going to feel different without you." I smiled. Maybe it's time they felt something. We hugged tight and silent, and just like that I stepped out. The lobby doors hissed shut behind me. The city was loud and alive, cars honking heels, clacking wind, slipping between buildings, and for the first time in a decade, I wasn't hurrying to catch up, I was deciding where to go. The next morning, I opened my laptop in a shared workspace, downtown, glass walls, exposed brick indie jazz playing somewhere in the distance. The desk was bare, but it felt more mine than anything at Cinevision ever had. The document on my screen read, Brightleaf Advisory Lab, Strategic Charter, V10, no logos, no hierarchy, no permissions needed. I built the foundation over coffee and silence, a flexible advisory model, one-on-one strategy with executive teams, client language audits, brand trust mapping. By noon, Daniel had signed the formal agreement. By the end of the week, 2 more prospects had emailed, "Heard what you did for Brightleaf. Can we talk? I didn't pitch, I didn't post on LinkedIn, I didn't announce anything, but word travels fast when truth is rare." By week 3, Claire had joined officially. I brought her on as co-founder. She didn't ask for a title. She just said, "Let's make something we don't want to escape from." We built slowly but deliberately. We didn't chase growth, we chased alignment. Clients came not for noise, but for clarity. We weren't the loudest team in the room, but we asked the best questions. One afternoon, Leah from Creative texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, just thought you should know they've replaced you twice." "How's that going?" I replied. She sent back one line. "They're still presenting your slides." That night, I sat in the kitchen of my tiny apartment, eating takeout from the same Thai place I always ordered from during late nights at the office. But this time, it tasted different, not because of the food, because I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was chasing impact. I thought back to the moment when I first realized I was being cut out of the Brightleaf meeting, the bitterness, the quiet shame. Now I was being brought in before the meeting ever got scheduled, not to polish someone else's ideas, but to create the map. 1 month into the launch, I received a message from someone unexpected. "Derek, Julia, hope you're well. Would you be open to a conversation about collaborating with us in the future? I think our clients could benefit from your approach. Let me know." I stared at the message for a long time, then I smiled and hit archive. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They just need to stay closed. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Claire and I clinked 2 mismatched coffee mugs and toasted to first invoice. She said, "First unsolicited testimonial," I added. "First time we said no to a client who didn't get it." We laughed. It wasn't glamorous. It was better later. I opened my laptop one last time before bed. On slide 14 of the Brightleaf deck, the one that started everything, I added a footnote. "If they try to mute your voice, build a stage where you never need permission to speak." I closed the file and with it a chapter, not the kind that ends in applause, the kind that ends in silence, the kind that tells you you've finally arrived. Sometimes your greatest growth doesn't come from being promoted. It comes from being excluded. Julia was cut out of the room she built, only to discover she didn't need that room to lead. This story reminds us that recognition isn't always granted by titles or bosses. It often comes from doing excellent work quietly until the right people notice. When they do be ready, because the moment you're invited to lead, you must decide, do you climb the ladder they ignored you on, or do you build your own? Julia chose the latter and walked away, free.